Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp, and I'm again discussing how to decode magical symbols with a particular focus on the planetary talismans in the Key of Solomon. So last time I spoke about magical alphabets and the use of Hebrew and different god names and different psalms. You can find out about that in my previous video, which I will link in the description below. Today I'm going to talk about other magical languages that can be used in talismans of this nature, as well as some of the other symbols that can be used. So if you watched my previous video, you will know that more often than not, it is Hebrew that is used in the creation of magical talismans. Hebrew words, Hebrew names for God, Hebrew angels, and biblical verses from Psalms and similar books. And the reason why Hebrew is used is because it is seen in many ways as a magical language. There is the sacred art of gematria, whereby each Hebrew letter is attributed a numeric value which has some esoteric significance. And each Hebrew letter also represents some archetype in the universe, which again has esoteric significance. And Hebrew letters can represent different points on the tree of life. A very important diagram. If you don't know about the tree of life, go and watch my videos on Kabbalah for more information on that. So not only is it necessary to understand what the translation of particular Hebrew words might be, but also understanding why a particular angel might be significant, why a particular god name might be significant, and even why a particular letter might be significant. So those are all layers of meaning that you need to unravel in order to understand the way that Hebrew is used in magical talismans. There's a lot of resources out there that you can use to find those meanings, but 777, the book, is probably the best resource that you could get your hands on for that. But Hebrew is by no means the only language which is given a sort of magical significance. Ancient Greek is also considered a very sacred language, and like Hebrew, the Greek letters each have numeric value, and so you can calculate numbers based on words written in Greek, as in Hebrew. So Greek is another magical language that often gets used. If you are familiar with the Ars Paulina, this is one of the books within the volume known as the Lesser Key of Solomon. You'll see a lot of letters around the perimeter of those symbols, and that's ancient Greek. And what are some of the other symbols that you'll see in certain talismans? Well, quite often you'll see planetary symbols and symbols of the zodiac. This is particularly true of the Ars Paulina, the book that I just mentioned. But you see the planetary symbols and the symbols of the zodiac cropping up in a lot of different talismans. So it's important to be familiar with those if you want to understand all of the different symbols and decode all of the different symbols that are used in magical talismans. But there's another very specific type of symbol that often gets used in talismans, which people sometimes don't understand, and that is the geomantic symbols. So if you're not familiar with the geomancy, geomancy is a form of divination or fortune telling where you get a stick, basically, and you poke some dots randomly in some soil, and then you have a look at the pattern of the dots and you try and categorize that according to subsequent rows of a single versus a double dot. And that's supposed to form a number of different figures. Roughly speaking, that's what geomancy is. It's a very earthy form of divination, hence geomancy. But the geomantic figures that result from this form of divination also correspond to different cosmic symbols. And relevant to our purposes, certain geomantic figures are attributed to certain planets. So here's a table which illustrates that. As you'll see, in the leftmost and rightmost column, there are the original geomantic characters. And then in the middle here, attributed to each of the planets. There is a whole series of symbols attributed to each planet. And basically the premise here is that you can trace a series of lines to connect the dots of each of the geomantic figures, and you can trace those lines in various different configurations, which gives you each of the different symbols for that particular figure, which of course is attributed to a particular planet. So as a result of this process, you can generate a whole bunch of characters that are divided into sets, and each set of characters corresponds to a particular planet and can be used to represent a particular planet. So let's see now how the geomantic characters are utilized in the encoding of symbolism in the talismans of the Greater Key of Solomon. So what you're looking at now is the first pentacle of Jupiter, or the first talisman of Jupiter. And this is a talisman that is used to invoke the spirits of Jupiter. And what you see here is a kind of design where you've got 4 crossbars intersecting at a central point. It's got a kind of a Scandinavian or a Nordic kind of a vibe to it. Perhaps there's some influence there. But at the end of each of these lines in the central circle, you see a figure. And these, roughly speaking, correspond to the geomantic figures of Jupiter, the geomantic characters of Jupiter. And you can double check this for yourself in this video as well as in my previous video by going back and having a look at those tables of figures and comparing it with the talisman. You'll see, in particular with the geomantic characters, there's not an exact parallel, but roughly those symbols are inspired by those particular characters. And then we have the Hebrew around the edge of the talisman as before, concealing a number of angelic names. A dead giveaway that you're dealing with the name of an angel is that it ends in L or ER. Now, one thing worth mentioning here is that sometimes Hebrew words and angelic names and God names are used to convey a particular meaning, corresponding to a particular type of planetary energy, for example. But sometimes angelic names or God names can be used together in order to symbolize the universality of a talisman, in order to apply the influence of that talisman or that symbol in a universal fashion. So an example of this in the Greater Key of Solomon is the 7th pentacle of Saturn. Once again, we see a very alien-looking design and a magical alphabet being incorporated into the symbol. And the purpose of this talisman is to shake, as though with an earthquake, the world itself, but also the different levels of the heaven inhabited by the different orders of the angels. In order for the talisman to have that effect, what has actually been written here is the names of the 9 orders of angels, both in Hebrew and in the passing of the river alphabet, in the innermost part of the talisman, excluding the outermost periphery. By listing all 9 orders of the angels, you're creating a talisman that has an influence on each level of the cosmos. And all known orders being used together is being used to represent a totality, that the influence or the reach of that talisman is total or universal. Another example where this sort of thing occurs is with the Circle of Solomon in the Lesser Key of Solomon. When you're dealing with the spirits of the Goetia, who can be quite deceitful and mischievous, you need good magical protection, and so there's a circle that you are meant to write around yourself, and there's a number of Hebrew names that are included in that circle. And what you find if you decode the meaning of each of those Hebrew names is that there's one word of power or divine word for each of the 10 Sephiroth on the Tree of Life. So by using a name that is a symbol of each of the 10 Sephiroth and assembling them together in one place. You're creating a symbol that has a total or universal effect. There is nothing that is going to penetrate that circle to bring you harm. And sometimes you'll even see alchemical symbols being used in a talisman or on a magical tool. So by understanding the meaning of the alchemical symbols, you've got another method of decoding magical symbolism. So I hope you enjoyed that video. You've got even more tools now to break the code hidden in many of the symbols of the Western esoteric tradition. In my next video, I'm going to discuss number and letter squares, as these are other commonly used methods for constructing magical symbols, and in particular, talismans. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, what were your thoughts on this video? Leave your comments down below, and questions as per usual. Please hit that subscribe button to support my work and so you can get notified every time I release a new video. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.